not done well on these, go back, get the correct answers for these, and make sure you study these for the first 100 points. The other 100 points are going to come from the new material that we're going to cover over the next couple of weeks. Any questions, any comments before we get going? Sure.
What is the difference between vaccination and immunization?
There is no difference. Yeah. The reason I didn't want immunization is because I used immunity in the question. And so I was looking for vaccination because but there's no difference. It's the same thing. That's why I gave you credit for it. Now that I think about it, vaccination doesn't necessarily mean that you become immunized. What if it doesn't take? So you could be vaccinized, being given the antigen, but not develop an immunization to it. So if you wanted to nitpick, that's where I would go with it. So the next couple of weeks, we're going to actually start looking at some of the human systems and the microbes that affect the human system, some of the diseases of the human systems. We'll look at skin, we'll look at the digestive system, we'll look at the respiratory system. It's probably as far as we'll get. We'll cover quite a bit of microbes there. And then, if time permits, I'll grab a couple of other diseases from some of the other systems as well. And we'll look more in more detail at Streptococcus aureus and at Streptococcus pyogenes. You'll find that those microbes are responsible for a host of different diseases. Tonight, we're going to start by looking at epidemiology. So epidemiology is the study and distribution of health states. What it means then is that we're not concerned about just where people are sick or where disease is going, but we're also concerned about where people are healthy. So both positive and negative is looked at when we're doing epidemiology. An epidemiologist then is somebody that's going to investigate disease, look at all social levels, collect data. We consider the principles of epidemiology. We're really talking about communicable diseases and non-communicable diseases. Now, a communicable disease is something that can be transmitted from one person to another. So there's a chain of events that goes on with that transmission. The microbes are located in a reservoir. They're someplace where they're living. And from there, they've got to be transmitted. They've got to leave that reservoir. So there's got to be a portal of exit, if you will, where they depart. But once having left the reservoir, in order to cause infection, there also has to be a portal of entry. And so, in order for a communicable disease to be passed on, we see this sequence of events where the microbe leaves its reservoir, through some portal of exit and enters a new host through the portal of entry. And we'll note that that portal of entry has to be appropriate for the microbe. We can also have non-communicable diseases. These are going to be diseases that are generally picked up from the environment or your normal flora. Not something that you're going to transmit to other people. Any questions? So before we go any further, talk about some of the terms that are used when discussing communicable diseases. We can talk about the rate of disease. And this is the percentage in a given population that's infected. So we could be talking about just this classroom, your rate of disease. Then if you're talking about, say, the flu, could be just 10 people in this classroom, so you'd say 10% of the infected population. But with regards to the rate of disease, we can also talk about the attack rate. The attack rate is those individuals that develop the disease compared to those that were exposed. The attack rate can reflect many factors here. The infectious dose, the community's immunity, the microbe's ability to get past your defenses, morbidity rate, this is the number of cases per population at risk. So influenza could be described as having a high morbidity rate because we see that the population at risk, a lot of people get sick from influenza. But influenza has a low mortality rate. It doesn't kill a lot of people. So mortality rate is the percentage of people that die from the disease. The percentage of people that die from the disease that are infected. Okay? So it's not just the mortality rate in the general population, but the individuals that have been infected, how many of those die? Incidence, number of new cases. Prevalence, number of existing cases. Endemic. A disease that is in the community, that's local, always there. You can think of the common cold or the flu as an example of an endemic disease. You can get epidemics in which a disease can spread and you get a large number of cases. Usually happens when a disease is introduced to a population that hasn't been exposed to that disease before. So you can get an epidemic in that general population or community. Like what we saw when the Spaniards came over to Mexico and infected the Aztecs with smallpox. You got this epidemic that occurred locally because they had never been exposed to the disease. There was no immunity in the population whatsoever. Pandemic. This is now a condition where the disease has spread worldwide. HIV is an example of a pandemic right now. You can also have an outbreak. This is where you have a small number of localized cases, usually for a brief time, and a specific population is infected. Generally doesn't spread much further than that, but you can have outbreaks that lead to epidemics. So let's go back to talking about communicable diseases and turn our attention to the reservoirs in which we find microbes, disease-causing microbes. The most significant probably to us are human reservoirs. And it is also the easier reservoir to control. Because if you think about it, a microbe that only infects humans and can only be found in humans, control the humans and you control the microbe. That's why we quarantine people. If you quarantine individuals that are sick, you prevent them from exposing others, you can prevent the spread of the disease. If a microbe solely infects humans, you have the potential to eradicate it from the population if you can vaccinate for that microbe or eliminate it from the human population. We did that with smallpox. There hasn't been a case of smallpox since 1979 because we've eradicated it. We've immunized everybody for smallpox. I don't know if we still immunize for smallpox because it's not in the population anymore. With regards to humans, you can have symptomatic infections, but you can also have asymptomatic carriers. So, of course, those are symptomatic, those that we see signs of the illness. Coughing, sneezing, whatever it is, lesions that are developing, we can outwardly tell that they are sick, and we can quarantine these guys to prevent the spread of the disease. This here is a major problem, the asymptomatic carriers, because we don't know they're sick. And this is one of the reasons why the HIV virus was able to spread so readily initially, because the young men that were becoming infected weren't necessarily showing any signs of illness for the first couple of years. You know, there's an initial, after exposure, there's an initial time where you might feel a little flu-like symptoms, but many will recover from those flu-like symptoms and go on feeling just fine for the next couple or 3 years while the disease continues to grow in the body. And during that time, they're going out and they're infecting other people. So asymptomatic carriers can be a major problem for epidemiology because we don't know that people are sick and they're out there spreading the disease. Animal reservoirs. Non-human, if you will. Talking now poultry, skunks, bats, raccoons, things that can transmit disease via a bite or because you're feeding on them. We call these zoonotic diseases. Zoonosis, transfer from animal to human. So there's a big scare going on right now here in California. Mad cow disease. Familiar with it? Have you heard about it? Central Valley, we found one cow with mad cow disease. The concern is that the thing that causes the disease is a prion. It's a protein that changes the structure of other proteins so that those proteins now are non-functional. The only way that you get it, though, is that you have to ingest it. You have to eat infected cows. And that's how it gets passed to other cows, is through eating of infected material.
Did you say a protein that changes the structure?
Yeah, and there's still a lot of debate about whether or not prions really exist or if they're a product of a viral infection. So, but right now, the science is that there's these proteins, and when you get infected by one of these proteins and they infect the brain and the spinal cord, the proteins themselves cause other functional proteins to change shape, so that they no longer function and actually start going out and causing other functional proteins to change shape too. So you get this cascade of proteins becoming non-functional, and so then those brain cells eventually die because they don't work anymore. So that's what they are. Like I said, there's some debate as to whether or not prions are real or if they're actually a byproduct of some kind of viral infection.
So you mentioned that how does it get transmitted to other cows?
They feed it to them.